Good morning. Today I'm looking at very well-known verses from Lamentations. Now, most of Lamentations we don't look at very often. We don't read it. It's a very, very emotional, very sad, very horrific in ways book, lamenting the terrible destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. Jerusalem was besieged 3 times. There was terrible suffering, terrible want, terrible hunger, terrible things happened in Jerusalem. And Jeremiah writes this lament. It's beautifully constructed, actually. It's a piece of Hebrew poetry, beautifully constructed. We can't see the beauty of it in English, unfortunately, but it's worth a study for that alone. But it's a very sad book. It's about terrible suffering, terrible pain, terrible injuries. And right in the middle of it, it's 5 chapters long, and right in the middle is a verse 21, which says, "But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope." Right in the middle of wailing and bewailing and talking about affliction and bitterness and terrible suffering and terrible anguish, Jeremiah says, "But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope." You know, when we are in the middle of really difficult circumstances, when life seems to be hopeless, seems to be full of disaster and terrible things, we're probably never ever likely to suffer in the way that these the people of God here in Jerusalem were suffering. Now that's probably too extreme, because there are terrible places in this world where there is a great deal of suffering as a result of war, which is what Jeremiah was writing about. But whatever situation we face, we can make the choice to think about God, to turn to God, And how is it possible in the midst of terrible suffering to say, as he says in the next verse, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end." Here he is, watching and being part of terrible agony, terrible suffering, many deaths, physical atrocities, terrible things. And yet he could say, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end." God is with his people in their suffering. He is steadfast, and his love never ceases. This is an incredible statement. It's simple to say, but so profound as we meditate on it, that everything that God does and is love. Everything. Even in the midst of terrible suffering, God is loving all those, everyone, the people on both sides. He loves. He loves. He is love. His steadfast love. It's like a straight line. It never varies. It never changes. It doesn't go up and down. It doesn't waver. There's no emotion attached to it. People have said profound things like, you can't make God love you anymore by anything you do or say or think, and you can't make God love you any less. Those are true. And there are verses in Scripture which tell us that God's love is so high. We used to sing it as children. I don't know if you ever did. So high, you can't get over it. So low, you can't get under it. So wide, you can't get round it. Oh, what a wonderful love. It's all-encompassing. You are always in the centre of God's love, and his purposes towards you are motivated by love. And then he could say, the mercies never come to an end. God's mercies come from his love. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. God is faithful. He's faithful to his promises. He's faithful to his people. He's faithful. He never waves. He's completely and utterly trustworthy. He is completely and utterly dependable. He's constant. He never changes. And he loves. He loves you. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter what you've thought. You've probably, if you're anything like me, there are thoughts that have gone through your head that you wouldn't want anybody to know about. And God knows them all. And he loves. He loves. He loves you. He loves me. Lamentations 3:21. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. When you're in the middle of a terrible situation, and you're tempted to think that God has taken his finger off the pulse, God has forgotten you, God hasn't noticed that you're in trouble, he doesn't seem to have helped, he doesn't seem to be there. These are all changeable thoughts. These are all human reactions. These are all temptations to doubt. But in the midst of the difficulty, turn to these thoughts and have hope. Hope for the future. Hope that God is going to work it all out and bring you through it. He hasn't changed. He doesn't change. He is constant. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. What an amazing God. This unfathomable constancy of God. There's nothing like it. Nothing like it. And we rest in it today. We rejoice in it today. We wallow in it today. We wrap ourselves round with the wonderful thought that God's love for us never changes. And his mercies never come to an end. They're new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. Bye-bye then. See you tomorrow.